Welcome to KT Quick Reviews, where I play a game for about an hour or so and tell you about it. For this spooky month, Sony has decided to grace us with not one, but two spooky games. Oh, and a farming simulator. So KT's decided to finally take the plunge into survival horror and play the Callisto Protocol. I don't know much about the development of the series, but I do remember it being sold as a spiritual successor to Dead Space, or well, a Dead Space-like. I'm a massive fan of the Dead Space series, but I've never played them. Same with Resident Evil. Survival horror is a genre that sort of passes me by, not because I find them spooky, though they can be, but because a lot of them have controls that I just can't wrap my head around. Though the Callisto Protocol does have accessibility features that make things flow smoother. I ended up playing this game for about 3 hours on stream because every time I tried to get to a stopping point, the story just kept dragging me further and further into the void. Due to that, I'll be covering the story beats up until that point. The opening scene features carnage of a civilian area, a lone individual wandering the aftermath. The woman is identified as Danny Nakamura as two pilots watch the news from the comfort of their ship. Max and Jacob argue about their current job for a moment when a notification comes up about issues in the cargo hold. Jacob goes to check it out, only for him to realize that the ship has been boarded. As Jacob makes his way back to the bridge, it turns out the stowaway is Nakamura. Jacob closes the bulkhead on her, then proceeds to open the hangar door so as to try to eject her into space. She ends up shooting the glass of the bulkhead, and Jacob has to make a dramatic climb to Max. They are unable to stabilize the ship and crash into the moon of Callisto. Jacob manages to come to his senses, then goes to Max's aid, the unfortunate co-pilot barely alive. He mutters a few words and then passes. As Jacob tries to figure out what to do, the wall of the cockpit is cut away and the security units from the Callisto prison step inside. He confirms with Jacob if Max is alive, Jacob saying no. Handing him a respirator, they head outside, the security robot pulling Nakamura into frame. Jacob starts going at her, the security officer stopping him. Taking a moment to radio someone, he then brings Jacob and Nakamura to Black Iron Prison. On the ride in, Captain Ferris, the security officer, begins to address Jacob as an inmate, Jacob obviously confused by this. As he tries to plead, a projection of the warden comes into view, the figure giving a speech. Jacob still insists everything is wrong, Ferris telling him that he has no say in what is transpiring and to move on. He's rushed into a medical room where he's given a device called a core. As the procedure is concluded, everything fades to black and Jacob then wakes up in his cell unsure as to what has happened. Seeing a toy on the ground, he goes to pick it up only to be assaulted by the visage of his dead friend. Snapping back to reality, Jacob gets up to the sound of chaos all around him. A massive riot has broken out, several inmates either dead or fighting. Getting his way around the blocks, another inmate by the name of Elias calls him over. Jacob tells him he doesn't understand what's going on, Elias not knowing either. He then tells Jacob he knows the prison well and can get them out. He then hands him a shiv and directions to open the cells. Entering a central control room, Jacob is attacked by several rogue inmates. Managing to take a large crowbar for them, he takes out two, then confronts one that seems to be worse than the others. The creature rages at him, Jacob taking it out. Getting back to Elias, Jacob tells him what happened, the inmate not believing him. He then directs him to go to the top of the main watchtower. As Jacob makes his way there, he ends up in the solitary wing. Elias overcomes, telling him to be careful. As he gets through the blood-soaked corridors, Elias calls him again, stating that he had been attacked by someone he'd known for a while, they having turned into one of the creatures that Jacob has encountered. Getting into the infirmary, he comes across a security unit killing two inmates. Elias tells Jacob to stay out of sight since the system isn't working properly and they can only see them via his line of sight. Entering the surgical theater, Jacob comes across a chest and yep, the game did it. We've got facehuggers. This is such a crusty thing to do, but honestly, I'm here for it. It ended up making me scared of every chest I came across. Finally getting to the weapons lockup, the only thing Jacob comes across is a shock baton, it replacing the crowbar. Getting back to the main block, Jacob is now able to enter the watchtower where he comes across Ferris trying to take control of the situation. The inmate tries to sneak past, the security officer catching him. Ferris tries to understand what's going on, taking his aggression out on Jacob. Before he can do much more, Jacob unlocks the bulkhead and several creatures rush inside, taking Ferris out. Elias comments on the outcome, then tells Jacob to carry on, a safe room up ahead. Getting to a hallway crawling with creatures, Elias quickly pulls Jacob inside and the two manage to get free of the chaos. Elias hands Jacob a pistol, then tells him to upgrade it via the Reforge. Elias then tells Jacob of his plan, the simple task of getting a ship. Jacob is able to pilot it, but the person they need to bring onto the surface is locked up in the maximum security block. Though unsure of this plan, Jacob complies. Cutting to a locked door, Elias tells Jacob he needs to rip the implant out of a security officer. Though hesitant, he does so, a message from the past security playing. He panics over the riot, the warden responding with his location and that he is merely watching the situation unfold. Getting into another medical sector, Jacob comes across a dead security officer, he wearing the same gauntlet that Ferris had. Elias calls it a grip, stating it will be a useful tool. The vast majority of this until the next main story beat is just killing creatures, doing a few puzzles, and KT not understanding how to use the grip. Jacob finally makes it to the shoe, though he is unable to get in contact with Elias. Getting up to the controls, it turns out the innate is already inside. He tells Jacob to go to the gondola that will allow him to access the block. Getting inside, he's met with a gauntlet of enemies while the place powers back up. Hitting the controls, he brings down the cell with their person of interest, then goes about letting them out. Upon seeing the cell empty, Jacob enters only to be assaulted and locked in, the individual in question being Nakamura. Jacob, clearly upset, asks Elias if he knew it was her, Elias stating he didn't. She refuses to help and then decides to go her own way. Before leaving, she tells Elias not to trust Jacob. And this is essentially where I left off. By the time this video comes out, I would have already played more, if not beaten, the game. I really wish I had more to compare to when it came to the mechanics and combat, so I could give a more in-depth review, but as I said earlier, this is not a genre I've been privy to. The gameplay seems to be the main affair of run from one location, do a small environmental puzzle, fight some enemies, then carry on. We do have the stomp mechanic from Dead Space, so we can acquire items from enemies as well as weapon upgrading. From what I've been able to gather, the game focuses way more on melee than gunplay. The pistol is more so a weapon to help deal extra damage as opposed to being the primary weapon. And dodging. Dodging is the end-all be-all of most of your encounters. Even on the easiest difficulty, I found if I wasn't able to consistently dodge, I'd be taken down fairly quickly. I also found going slower through rooms so as to stagger enemy encounters made it easier to handle most situations. Though there is obviously the odd jump scare or two where you just got no choice but to take a hit. I eventually got the handle of the pistol in melee, but the grip mechanics, which allow you to push and pull objects or creatures, just eluded me. I don't know if it's just because of how the buttons were laid out or what, but I found myself not understanding it. The game does give you enough time to figure out things organically, but my brain just couldn't brain this one. The other aspect of this game I really wanted to cover was the controller feedback. If you play on PS5, as I did, the controller goes bananas. There is the obvious, communications coming out of the speaker, but anytime I'd swing my shock baton, the whole controller would vibrate and the haptic in the triggers would cause me to really need to put some effort into it. Some might see this as a drawback, but I am here for it. The Callisto protocol went all out on the sounds and vibrations that the DualSense was capable of. Oh, and speaking of consoles, this game runs beautifully on PS5. There are a few frame drops here and there, but they are so sparse that I barely remember any happening. The lighting and overall texture quality is good as well, with only a few pop-ins here and there. So yes, my experience with this game is, well, good. I did end up reading a few reviews, wondering why people were treating it poorly, and honestly, it seems like when it comes to survival horror, this game just didn't deliver. I suppose if you're a fan of the genre and are clamoring for new titles, the Callisto Protocol's rehash of a few staples might come across as stale or overdone. Though as an outside observer, I really don't know how the genre can evolve past, well, what this game is. But honestly, if you're unfamiliar with this genre, I do feel this game is a good entry point. It's easy enough to pick up and has a lot of good accessibility features to help out less seasoned gamers. I suppose my main takeaway is that I may potentially have a knack for survival horror. I won't be picking up things like Resident Evil or Evil Within anytime soon, but that Dead Space remake just came out. I might give that a run. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you like this kind of content or even longer form videos, please be sure to subscribe. And if you want to help me out in other ways, I also have a Patreon. I'll see you all in the next video.